Hi, I'm Ted Elsner from the Sacramento Historical Fencing Academy, home of the Sacramento Frifector. While we're all dealing with our social distancing kind of experiment at the moment, we figured we would make some videos to help you out with that solo practice, keep yourself active, and work through the apocalypse, frankly. So today we're going to be talking about stance and footwork in Myers' system. The first thing we're going to look at is stance. Now, when we're talking about stance, we mean what like it sounds like, how to stand. We're going to start feet shoulder width apart. Okay, your feet and your shoulders should not look like you're in some kind of extended horse stance. Instead, we're going to be here in a nice, comfortable kind of position. From there, I'm going to step back with one of my feet. Right foot, left foot, doesn't really matter. Ultimately, either foot can end up forward, can end up back. For now, I'll step back with my right leg. I'm going to leave my front foot where it was. I want to keep my toes pointed forward, my knee above my foot. Watch out for that tucked in knee. We'll talk about that more in a bit. I can let my toe twist out slightly. I don't want it to twist in. Bad things happen with bladed weapons. My rear leg, straight, okay? Weight's on the balls of my feet. From my perspective, with my shoulders over my hips, my head above it, I should just be able to see my toe as I look down. If I'm leaning so far forward that I can't see my toe, I'm putting a lot of strain on my knee, it's too much, I can come back slightly. If I want to get lower, I'm not going to bend my legs. Instead, I'm just going to extend, then drop lower. Still, balls of the feet. So this right here, when I'm standing comfortably, one hip pointing about 10 o'clock. 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock is behind me, 9 and 3 to my sides. One hip's going to point to 10 o'clock, okay? Forward stance. This is where we're going to begin from. All of Myers' footwork, all of his movement in the art, longsword, dewsack, rapier, dagger, staff weapons, all of it is going to come from a rotation of the core. So I'm going to move around, and I'm not going to move around on my feet or with my arms. I'm going to move my body. So the very first thing that I want to do is I want to go into Myers' back-weighted stance. Okay, to get into that one, you see it in Zornhut pictures a lot. I'm going to turn from my core away from the opponent such that I'm still centered, okay? Balls of the feet, hip away. Now my hip is pointing at about 2 o'clock, okay? And that 2 and 10, we're always going to have one hip pointing at one or the other. Now I should note from this position, if I were to turn and look away at an opponent coming up from behind, just stand into my normal forward stance. I've just turned away. If I turn back forward and someone comes at me from the rear, now I'm in my back stance. It's the same thing. It's all perspective. Those two make sense. We're there. The third stance that we're going to get into is actually one that we ignore so much, and yet it's the very first image that we see when we look at Myers' plates in the longsword. The first gentleman standing on the left is standing in what we affectionately refer to as the turned out stance. I'm going to get there by rotating my core to my outside, bringing my right hip forward to 2 o'clock, turning my front foot, raising my rear heel off the ground, and being ready to step forward. So at this point, I've taken a step. If I want to pass straight forward to you, I'm going to drive forward, putting my foot down into the ground and stepping forward where I want to be. So let's look at that. So I'm in my forward stance. I turn to adjust my body, still looking at my target, and then I will just take a step straight forward. The advantage of taking my passing step, which is what I've just done, in this manner, is that my correction happens while I'm out of distance. I'm not landing in a unstable position and then having to correct in a moment where I might be receiving a strike, but rather I land strong, okay? So normally, you'll see people step in and then turn. We don't want to do that. We're going to turn and then step. So with our passing step, there's a couple of things we want to watch out for. The first and single most important, directly in front of me is a imaginary line. It points to my opponent. When I step forward, I do not want to step onto that line. I want to step either to the outside or even across, which we'll see in a minute. But if I step to this line, I'm going to end up very unstable. So when I step forward, still have that distance between my feet. If I turn and step straight into it, there's going to be a lot of instability because now I've narrowed my base very much. Any strike coming in the side, I don't have an ability to withstand it. Now, in rapier, we will see this narrower stance happen because it's going to be a right-hand forward weapon. But even then, we want to be very careful. We're not taking the passing footwork the same way. We're going to do a lot more gathering footwork, but we need to be careful about that. So, I turn and I step. Or I turn and I might even step and spring well off to the side, getting off that line. We'll see that later on in some of our drills, especially with the Zverkow, the Krumpau, other ones where we may want to spring out of the path of the enemy's weapon. So turn, do not step to your center, step. Nice and stable, okay? If I want to take my step backwards, same thing happens in reverse, as you've seen me do. I step back, and I adjust at that point. It's okay. Every step I take is going to end up in one of these three positions. I mentioned earlier a step across the line, okay? Let's jump ahead and look at that. It's called the false step. Meyer shows it numerous times. And it happens when I turn and I take my step, and rather than stepping to my right, I step to the opponent's right and I step through. And I find myself right back in that same turned out stance that I just was in, and I'll finish by taking our next step after this false step, which is a triangle step, which is going to be my rear foot pivoting around to adjust my angle. So I triangle step, and now I'm facing my target. So in front of you, I might stand in my basic stance, and I might find that my opponent is shifting to my right. And so I might triangle step and adjust. And they might shift more to my right, and I can triangle step and adjust. Conversely, they might be moving to my left, and so a small triangle step and adjust. And a small triangle step and adjust. At no point do I want to let someone get around to one of my flanks. So I'm always going to adjust those positions. So right off the bat, we've seen three steps. We've seen a passing step, where we turn and we step. We've seen our false step, where we turn and step intentionally across the line and finish with a triangle step. And then our third step, which is the triangle step itself, which could be to either side as we go. The last step we're going to look at before we move away from passing style footwork is what Meyer calls the double step. It is a passing step, followed by a triangle step, followed then by a gathering step. So, I might turn and step to the side, triangle step behind, gathering my feet together, and finish with a double step. Once again, that could be a turn, a step, a triangle that gathers, and then finishes with a double step. So that last one, the gathering steps, shows up much more in Dusak, rapier, other one-handed weapons, but it does show up in the longsword as well. Meyer's very clear on this. We're going to gather our feet together and then step forward. Or we're going to gather our feet back and then step back. These actions allow us to make choices on how we want to go. I might choose to gather forward, realize I don't want to complete that step, and then step back. I might have an opponent attacking at me, so I gather back to create distance, sometimes known as slipping the leg, and then come right back forward with it. Choices are inherent to what we want to do. If we don't have choices, then we're going to be dead, honestly. So when you're practicing your footwork, do each by itself, but also put them together in interesting and different ways. So I have a passing step. I have a gathering step. Can I gather then pass? Absolutely. In fact, you'll see a lot of times where we might choose to step forward into a turned out stance very briefly, especially if I'm out of range, and then take a longer passing step from behind. I might choose to pass, gather, forward. Again, a double step. However you can string these together, you should. They will arise naturally during the work once you've practiced them. If you try and practice your cuts without having practiced and work on your steps, then your results aren't going to be any good. So first, learn to walk, which is what this video is about. In the next video, we'll talk about how to cut. And after we've learned how to cut, we'll combine the cutting with stepping. It's a lot harder than you think. There's a lot going on. It's not enough to just move the sword through the air. But we'll see that next time. Thanks, guys.